So welcome to Dynamic Delegation. I'm Bart Loeser, and I am a professional trainer, and I've been in Toastmasters for about 12 years, playing almost every role one can play except the trio. I haven't gone that far and hope to never do so, but it's okay. No, not really. It's a lot of fun, but I have to say it is a lot of work. And so it's something that I would recommend to somebody who's got the time. Unfortunately, at this point, I don't have that kind of time, although I think I would love taking on those kind of roles because that is all about delegating. As a matter of fact, the entire district could not do what it does if we didn't delegate on down from what the top 3 people do and are responsible for to the people just below them, to the people just under them, to the people, and all the way down to the club level. So if we're going to be successful as an entire district, it takes a lot of people and a lot of delegation to get the job done. So tonight, what we're going to do is focus on certain objectives. One is to define what is dynamic delegation, as well as we'll address the benefits and the drawbacks of delegating, because there are actually good things about delegating and there are good reasons why some people may not want to delegate. And so we should look at them all to see what's getting in our way of delegating and getting the best out of other people. Also, I want to focus on what are the pieces to delegation that if we put this together, we can achieve the goals that we're going for. And if we're going for goals, make sure that they're good goals, effective goals, goals that will make things happen. And that means they have to have some way of measuring what is a good goal. And so there's a tool that you guys may be familiar with called the SMART goals. And I'm going to be talking about that and actually add to it just a slight to make it smarter, to show you how we can really even maximize that even more. And then we're going to apply a 10-point checklist that I'm actually going to narrow down. I'm narrowing it down to just 8 today because I thought, well, I can combine these actually and make it an 8-point checklist, which is what we're going to start doing. And from the top, from the biggest industries down, they're all dependent on the effectiveness of delegation. Steve Jobs, of course, as everyone knows, is one of the founders of Apple and certainly their spokesman for many, many years, said that management is about persuading people to do things they do not want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could, which sounds like a very Steve Jobs thing. You can see it as he starts out with his new iPhone 12 that's coming out this year. If he was around today, he would be up on stage. And this is one of the things that he would say. This is not about management as it is about leadership. Because if you can inspire people and motivate people to do things they never thought they could, what does that do for their self-confidence and their personal development? If you inspire them to step beyond their own boundaries, because who actually sets the boundaries in our lives as to what our potential is? Who do you think that is, Louise? Who limits you the most?
It's the person. It's me.
Right. It's the person. You, as somebody who is a leader for other people, see their potential. And what you want is you want them to see their potential. And sometimes people don't. They have a lot of reasons why they won't step up, saying, I don't have time, or I don't know how to do it, or I'm worried I might fail or disappoint. There's a lot of reasons why people don't step up. That's one of the reasons why leaders are so important, because sometimes people need someone to gently, and I do say gently, push people out of the nest, because sometimes birdies will never fly unless they're gently pushed. So our job as leaders is to gently push them so that they can see what we see, that we want them to see their own potential. We already see it. We know they can do it. We want them to see they can do it. So if we're going to define this, I think it's important to look at what actually defines dynamic, which is, very active and exciting and it's motivating. So one way of defining dynamic delegation is we're entrusting responsibility to another person, which is the #1 reason why people don't want to delegate. What do you mean I have to give responsibility? What if they don't do it right? Well, we are entrusting. So what's the key word there?
Trust.
Trust. Is it sometimes hard to trust that other people will get the job done to the quality that Ava wants it?
Mhm.
It can be a challenge. So one of the things is we have to be able to learn how to trust. And I'm going to teach you a simple method to be able to easily trust that they're going to get it done. The second thing is that it has to be constructive. You want to approach this in a way that's constructive and not destructive. Just like in Toastmasters, when we're giving feedback, you always want that feedback to sound constructive, where you're building them up, not tearing them down. How many of you would agree that if you seek to build bridges, you can expand possibilities in life, but if you burn bridges, you limit possibilities? So we want to seek to build bridges by being constructive. Another thing about dynamic delegation is that it should be fair and equitable, which means you don't dump on just the people you trust. Because if you've got a lot of people on your team, but you only want to give certain things to the people you trust, they're going to get everything and the other people aren't going to be doing anything, which might make them happy, but your people are going to get burned out. And they're also going to think, this isn't fair. And who gets to decide whether you are being fair and equitable? Do you get to decide that, or do they get to decide? So it's a good idea to keep in mind, you want to check in with people to see how they feel about how you're leading them. And if your intention is to be fair and equitable, but they think you're not being entirely fair or equitable, giving people an equal amount of work, which, as you know, in many of these Toastmasters clubs, there are some people doing a lot more of the work than others. And you want to even it out, which means you've got to get really good at delegating to some of these other people and getting them to step up. So, because it's all about delegating, not dumping. Another thing you want to do is to empower them to achieve the results. And empowering means you give them the power to come up with the solutions. Now that can be scary because then you have to let go of who's in control here, right, Betty? So you have to let go of the control and let them have some control and authority to make certain decisions. Now, it would be helpful if the decisions they make are decisions that you can support. Because is it easy to trust somebody when they want to do it in a way that you don't trust?
No, that's not easy.
No, and they say, but this is how I want to do it. Well, if their way of doing it, if you don't see how that's going to work, we're not ready to let go and let them run with this. We're going to need to do a little more work first before we can trust. Does anybody know what it would take to be able to trust somebody that they're going to get it done well? What do you think that would be? Lei, what do you think that would be? If you're going to trust somebody that it's going to get done well, what do you need to know for you to trust?
Well, I think it's, I just learned a terrible lesson today that I think I want to coach that person to do things, but it doesn't mean that I let it happen immediately. It takes constant checking and constant confirmation on the job can be done successfully. So it has to be a while in order for me to trust this person fully to take this on. I think it's constant checking and measuring.
And you make a good point, Lei, that you don't want to trust somebody until they have enough experience and they've proven themselves that they can do it, right? Because when people prove they can do it, it's easy to trust. But what if they've not proven it before? There is a method or a way of doing it where you can take someone who is fairly new and trust they're going to be able to get you the results. But to be able to trust, they have to know clearly what the results are that you want, and they have to have a plan for how they're going to get that done. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Is it helpful for you to know their plan and see how that's going to get done? Because whose job is it to support them through this process?
Ours.
That's our job. And it's hard to support someone if they have a plan that clearly doesn't look like it's going to work. So you want them to have a plan that you clearly see would work. So you want them to explain what their plan is on how they're going to get the results that you guys have agreed to. So they have a plan for how they're going to get the results, and they've explained it in such a way where you see that could work. How many of you would find it a little bit easier to trust knowing they have a good plan? But you can't do it if you don't know their plan. So that's why they need to explain their plan to you in such a way where you get how it would work. And if you don't see how it would work, you could just ask questions. You could say, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not really seeing how that's going to get the results. Could you explain that part to me? I'm not seeing that. And perhaps they just haven't explained it clearly, or they need to think it through a little more clearly. But if they can do this work with you, they can come up with a plan. But who is it that should come up with a plan when you're delegating to someone else?
They should.
Right. So you've got to get them to come up with the plan. Now, have you ever had somebody who said to you, I don't know what I'm going to do to make that happen? Well, that's going to be a problem, but that's where we might step in. What could you do if they don't know how they're going to get it done? Who has an idea?
Maybe offer some suggestions.
There you go. And how many suggestions should you offer? Because who should make the choice here?
They should.
Yeah, you don't make the choice for them on how they're going to do the job. They should make the choice. So they have to have the opportunity to choose. So how many options should you give somebody before it becomes a choice? We can go through them.
Maybe one or two, and then maybe they think up one of their own.
Well, there you go. So, well, we can look at it this way. How about if I say this? Okay, I'll give you one option. Does that sound like enough? No. How about this? Louise, I'll give you two options. You can either work with me and do it my way, or you can go somewhere else. Does that sound like a choice?
No.
No, I don't. That's not enough of a choice. So two is not enough. It has to be at least three options before it really feels like a choice, before they can choose from those three and own the choice they made. You can hold them accountable for the choice they make as long as it's a true choice. But it needs to be at least three options. Like Lay, you have children, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Do you tell them what to do, or do you let them choose from a variety of options as to what would be the best way for them to solve their problems?
Yeah, I lately try to learn to give them options, but you just need to stay peace with yourself if they choose the wrong option.
Yeah, you can guide them. As a matter of fact, you don't make them choose a particular option, but you just ask them questions. Oh, well, if you choose this option, I can see a problem here. This might get in the way. How would you get around that? And if they wouldn't have a way to get around it, it may not be a good choice. But what if they did have a way to get around that obstacle and it could be a good choice and you didn't realize they had a plan? So, and then who got to decide? Who got to choose, Lay?
Well, eventually I got to choose, but I can pretend that they can choose first.
Well, as long as you can convince them that they get the choice, you can do that. So you have an idea of what choice you would like them to make,
Yeah.
and you could perhaps guide them. But I might suggest, even if they could fail, I would rather they take that choice. Now, why would you let them take a choice where they could fail? Not in a way where they might risk their lives, but let's say where they will fail in a way where this isn't going to work, but it's not going to be the end of their world. Why would you let them make that choice?
Because they have to learn this anyway down the road in the life.
And the most powerful lessons you learn from in life are not when you do something and it works. It's when you do something and it doesn't work. That's the lesson that sticks. And so if you really want to teach someone a powerful lesson, let them make a choice that might even fail at least a little bit, because then you can review the choices and ask, well, how did that work? How did that go for you? And if they say not too good, well, can you tell me more about that? And see what lessons they've learned, and then see if perhaps a different choice might work better. But notice how powerful it can be when you teach people in that way, because then you're not making them wrong. They're learning the lesson on their own, and they get to make the choice. And when people make choices, that's when not only can you hold them more accountable, but they're going to put more energy into the effort. Would you agree that people don't tend to put much effort if they don't get to make the choices?
Yes.
So if you want them to put 100% effort in, make them choose how they're going to solve this problem that is theirs. And then, Evelyn, you can hold them accountable, because if it doesn't work, whose fault is it? If their plan didn't work.
It's theirs.
Yeah. And I don't want to beat them up over it. I just want them to notice it. I want them to own it because they made the choice. And if it didn't work, I want them to fix it. And they're more willing to do that if I didn't get involved. All I'm doing is letting them choose and then checking in with them. So this is what I mean by dynamic delegation. You're teaching people valuable lessons that will take you and your team far as they learn even from their mistakes. Because who here would agree that in Toastmasters, we encourage people to try things that they haven't necessarily done before? But what if they make a mistake? What if they fail? Well, it's the most powerful lesson for learning, right, Ava? So you want to be able to do these things and empower them to achieve the results. And then lastly, the key to this is making sure that they have the answer to the WIIFM. Does anybody know what that stands for? It's the #1 motivator that is out there for people. They all have to have the answer to this question in their mind. What is it, Lay?
It's what's in it for me.
Exactly. What's in it for me? What is in it for them? Because if they don't see what's in it for them, are they going to be willing to put energy into it if they don't see what's in it for them? So you want to make sure, if you're going to delegate, that they clearly see what's in it for them, so it motivates. Having the reason, here's the reason why I want you to do this. Here's the reason why I'm delegating this to you, even though I could do it on my own. Even though I might even be able to do it quicker if I just did it myself. But I'm not doing it because for quickness. I'm doing it because I want you to learn, because I know you can do this. And I want to give you a chance to practice this, even though I could, take care of it right now. Like, I could get on for my club as president and call my members and get them to fill up the next meeting and get every role filled over the course of 2 or 3 hours if I do the work. But I don't need to learn how to do that. And it's not really my job to do that. It's the VPE's job or the Toastmasters' job, not the president's. So I would want to delegate that to them, even though I could do it pretty quickly. But I want them to learn how to do it just as quickly. So that's going to be the key. As Stephen Covey, who wrote of many books, he wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he said, "We accomplish all that we do through delegation, either to time or to other people." So either delegate your time or delegate to other people, but it's a good use of tasks in your life and getting things done. It's much more impactful and effective in your life if you get good at delegating. But there are things that get in the way. Delegation has both positives and negatives. So what are some of the positives? Who would like to suggest, what are some of the benefits to delegating to other people?
You don't have to do it all yourself.
There you go. There's a benefit to you. You don't have to take it all on yourself and get burned out or get an attitude because you have to do it all. What else?
I'm thinking another benefit is a tremendous one. We're talking about the sustainability plan of our club. The more I delegate, I'm more likely to prepare another person to step in to do this job for the club sustainability.
You're even setting those expectations because you're expecting them to do it. Yeah. So, and it makes them more prepared to take over. And how many of us are waiting for someone else to step in and do these jobs so we don't have to do them? So that's how you do that, Evelyn, so that you're not having to be, the VPE next year because you were the president this year. It's like, no, you deserve to be immediate past president and not have to do anything else. But you have to set that up now and start training. Who is going to be your president? Who is going to be the next VPE? So that you don't have to do these things. So what are some other benefits?
For me, I feel like you allow that person to see their own personal leadership capabilities when they receive new tasks.
This is how you build new leaders. You delegate. You build it by giving them assignments and letting them take the risk, letting them take the responsibility and learn what it's like to take on that responsibility so they can do it more and more. Plus, you build their confidence in doing so, which is what we're all about in Toastmasters. I'm sure you all realize that of all the 5 competencies in pathways, there's one that's in every single path. And what is that?
Confidence.
Building confidence, yes. That's one thing you're going to do in every single path. And that's one thing we want to do for everybody who plays a role in Toastmasters is you want to build their confidence by delegating to them. Have you ever had somebody say, well, I don't really like being the timer because I like listening to the speeches and I don't want to have to pay attention to the time? Can you not do both? I think you can, and I'd like you to try it. So, and you delegate that to them because we need someone to be our timer and you don't have a role. So we'd like you to take it. And besides, did they not agree when they joined Toastmasters as part of their Toastmasters promise that they will take on any role as assigned? You said you would do that. So your answer whenever you're asked is what?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I will do that. It's a good thing to remind people in your club, Evelyn, that that's what they agreed to. So that way you don't have to do it all. Is there any other benefits that you can think of for delegating?
They're ready to take the role next year.
There you go. Yes, for successions. You need someone who's going to take on these roles next year. So it's a great benefit to all of you who are officers. So let's look at a few of these. The greater productivity, when you're getting this out to other people, you can be much more productive as an organization. And it gives you a chance to focus on higher priorities. That's why managers don't do a lot of the littler work, a lot of the more routine work, because it's not a high priority. It just needs to get done. You give that stuff to other people so that you can focus on the higher priorities, which is what you are paid for as a manager. You're not paid to do the filing. You can give that to someone else. So another thing is it gives them an opportunity to develop and grow, as you guys said. It increases team flexibility because you can cross-train. You can actually get others who learn how to do these skills so it doesn't have to be just the one person taking care of that. And when you cross-train, you could actually get that person trained to take on that role maybe next year. And by the way, I can send this out to everybody so you don't have to worry about taking too many notes here. I'll make sure to send this to everyone. You can also build trust and enhance relationships. That's one of the big benefits of delegating is you show people that you believe in them. And when you demonstrate you trust people and you believe in them, they believe that you value them. And the more people feel valued, the more they give back. And so it builds those relationships. It builds that favor bank. When you do favors for other people, or you get them to do favors for you, hey, I'd like you to take this on, then that also means they can that you have their back, that when they need something, they know they can trust you'll be there because they were there for you.
It's also the fastest way to build trust.
It is indeed the fastest way to build trust and the fastest way to build relationships on teams. When you delegate to other people and you support them when you delegate, you definitely demonstrate that you care and that you appreciate them and you value them. And so it's a tremendous way to build those relationships and build that trust.
Well, it's also that psychological, because if they do something for you, then they know that, well, they must like you or else why would they have done that thing for you?
And it makes people more committed. So one of the things, when you delegate more people in Toastmasters, they are more committed to the club. So you want people playing more roles than just a few people because you want everyone in your club feeling committed that if I wasn't there, this club can't stay around. How many of you feel sometimes that if you weren't in that club, it's going to suffer? And it's like, that's why you need to delegate, because everybody should feel that way, that they all play an important role in keeping this club strong. And lastly, it's an opportunity to celebrate team success. It's an opportunity to praise and inspire others. When they do things or they're moving forward in a project, you can keep praising them, which demonstrates you value the efforts they're making, and it makes them want to put more effort in. So what are some of the things that get in the way then? Because if these are the benefits, there must definitely be some drawbacks as well. What are some of the things that make it difficult for people to delegate?
Time to teach.
What was that?
Time to teach.
Oh, time. It takes time. How many of you sometimes want to delegate, but quite frankly, it'd be just much quicker if you just did it yourself? It does take extra time. But the whole point is, if you teach them well, you won't have to do it in the future. And it's the only real way to train people on your team to do it well, is you've got to delegate to them. What's another thing that makes delegation scary? What do we fear?
Failure.
We fear that they're going to fail. They're not going to get the results. We need the results, and we've given them the responsibility. What if they fail? Well, this is one of the reasons why you want to check in with people, because if they start to go off the path away from success, when do you want to notice if they're veering off of the path of success?
At the beginning.
As soon as possible. So you have to keep track of where are they going and how is the progress happening with this. Because if you see it, that there's no progress happening, or you're seeing them veer off track, you want to get them back on track as quickly as possible, or else it could fail. So that's why I have this checklist for delegating, so that you can make sure that these things don't happen. Because that is one of the biggest things that people fear, that they're not going to do as good a job as I would do. How many of you have your own way of doing things and they have their own way of doing things, and the two don't necessarily match?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Let's say you stay focused on it and you're getting this job done, but they're not quite so focused. Like last year when I was the club coach chair, I was asking my club coaches to get back to me, and I wanted them to come to my trainings and I wanted them to come to my updates. And there were some people who just would not come. And they would just say, trust me, I'm getting it done. Well, when one of those people is Melody Moore, I guess I would have to say, I'm going to trust if she says she's doing it, she probably is doing it. So there are some people who demonstrate, or who have demonstrated in the past they can do it, but if they haven't demonstrated, I might want to check in with them just to see how it's going. Because can you just trust someone who's not giving you any evidence they're making progress? They just say, just trust me, I'll get it done, I'll find time. That's a hard plan to trust, right? I'm going to need a little more information on, well, what is your plan for making sure that happens? Now, of my clubs, I got 6 clubs. Well, I didn't. My club coaches got them to become distinguished in the last month. Now, up until that last month, I didn't think almost any of them were going to become distinguished. But then again, my club itself, I brought in 7 members into my club on June 30th so that we could earn our distinguished status. Now, I was determined that we would do this, and I found a way to get 7 people to join my club in one day. Now, that is a tremendous amount of work, and I do not recommend that technique to anyone else. But I realized no one else in my club had done it, and if it's going to get done, it's going to have to be me. But until then, I had done my best to try to delegate it. And, you know, at certain points, sometimes there's failure, but I wasn't going to allow that. We were presidents distinguished. I said, I'm not okay with us failing here. I want us to be presidents distinguished and get the points that we so earned. So that's the reason why I did that. But I don't recommend that for everybody. But here are some of the things that do get in the way. As Ava said, it requires a lot of extra time. And sometimes it's just easier to do ourselves. It is a lot of work to delegate. It takes focus, it takes time, you have to check in with people, and you don't have control over how things are going, which makes it harder to trust. That is one of the problems with delegating, is you've got to let go of your control. So they always say, my mother's favorite saying was, let go and let God. Well, someone's got to have control, but it can't be me. So you're going to have to let go of that and give them a chance to possibly fail, but we're going to find ways to support them. There is a risk that the results you're going to get are less than satisfying. That is, now, of course, if you're clear what the results are and they've committed to those results, you shouldn't get less than satisfying results if they have a good plan. But we've got to make sure they are clear about what the results are. And then there's the risk of causing resentment to the delegatee. So if you delegate to someone, sometimes they get resentful. You're putting a lot of work on me and I don't have time for this. And sometimes that scares us off from delegating. This is why sometimes I delegate to teams of people to do things, so that it's not just one person doing something. So try to do that. Is that, you want to let the delegatee, the person that you delegate to know there are reasons why I'm doing this that are good for you. What's in it for them is an important thing for them to see. And then they won't have resentment if they clearly see what's in it for them to do this. Any questions about these drawbacks?
Hey, Bart, this
Yes.
is Evelyn.
Yes, Evelyn.
So I think one of the things that I struggle with is, our club happens, during our work day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that as a manager, I can sometimes have the takeover spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That when things aren't going well, I'm just going to take it over. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to coach the person through it. So if it's my team of supervisors, if I've given them this assignment,
Mm-hmm.
and I do check up on them and it's still not completed,
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I do have a lot of control over my job, right? So I am super in control. I'm a stickler. And I find sometimes with Toastmasters that I still want to have the takeover spirit, but I still want to give everyone an opportunity to take on those roles and, do these different assignments, or, hey, you're signing up for speeches and you didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, that's probably personally one of my struggles, because I think that's probably why I am the club president. And then I've also juggled being the Toastmaster and then also doing a speech all in one meeting.
Oh my.
Because I wanted to make sure, like, hey, we had a speaker, and hey, we also had a Toastmaster. So
well, you make a really good point, Evelyn, that we don't have a lot of control here like we might in the workplace. In the workplace, you have some authority as a manager because they've gone to work here, they've made certain commitments to make this a priority, whereas in Toastmasters, all sorts of things get in people's way. And so they say, yeah, I was going to speak, but I got really busy, so I didn't write my speech. This is one of the reasons why when someone commits to a speech, I want to go over their speech. If my meeting is on Monday, I want to go over their speech with them on Friday. And if they say I'm not quite ready on Friday, well, then let's talk Saturday morning. I'm going to put a bit of pressure on them and try to remind them of their commitment that we're counting on you. But you do want to get the commitment from them. But it is true, you can't force anybody. So if someone just decides not to show up, you can't call them and say, get on that phone and give your speech. You've got to deal with that. But one thing that you can do is one thing I like to try to make sure is, like, when should people in our clubs be working on their next speech?
Immediately.
Yeah.
Now. So if there's anyone who's not working on their next speech, my question would be, why? Well, if they just gave a speech the other day, then maybe I can understand. But otherwise, if they're not already thinking about their next speech, they should be thinking about it, so that if somebody says on Friday, I don't know, I'm not really making much progress on this, make sure you've got somebody who you could fall back on who could give a pocket speech. So Evelyn, you should try to have everyone in your club who has not spoken in the last couple of weeks, they should have be preparing for a speech and know what that project is and start getting that speech ready. Now that's a little bit more than what we can do here in this session, but I would say certainly learning how to lead without authority, finding ways to make sure that these roles are filled and they're covered is one of the jobs that, is it the president's job to do that?
No, it's not.
Whose job is it?
So it would be the VPE.
Whose job could it be when it's not the VPE?
Toastmasters.
The Toastmaster. So everybody who plays a Toastmaster, which you may only do once every 6 months, your job is to make this meeting happen. You make sure you've got the speakers lined up. You make sure you got your evaluators lined up. You make sure you got the smaller roles lined up or assign them last minute, but you don't have to worry about so much with that. But you make this meeting yours. You create the theme and you get people excited about being the Toastmaster. And you only have to do it once every, well, depending on the size of your club, maybe once every 4 or 5 months. So you shouldn't be a Toastmaster any more than that, because you should be delegating that to other people so that they learn that role as well. So that's one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, is to practice delegating more to people in the club, especially, it doesn't have to be the VPE, but the VPE should be delegating to the Toastmaster, and make sure each Toastmaster for the next meeting has 2 weeks, and they've got at least 2 weeks to put this together, Evelyn, put together that meeting. And when should they start it?
Now.
Yes, now. Don't wait until a week out and then say, oh yeah, the meeting's coming up, now we're a week away, I need to know who my speakers are going to be. You should know that 2 weeks before. You should know you're going to be a Toastmaster maybe a month before, and start planning your meeting now. Find out who hasn't given a speech and see if you can convince them to give a speech in your meeting. But have them make it their own, and you delegate that to them. So that's what I'm going to encourage you to do.
Do you find that truly to be successful, relying on, like, we have Toastmasters of the day who sign up the day, like between that and evaluators, those are the hardest roles that we can get to fill, because a lot of our members are newer and they don't feel comfortable, right? They don't know. So right now we're not putting that pressure on any of our Toastmasters, like for the day.
Well, when they're new, I can understand. Yeah.
Yeah, like we have a VPE and assistant to a VPE. So we have 2 people that kind of help run that calendar, and then we have the rest of the officers that kind of fill in. But I've heard a lot of other clubs have like the Toastmaster that helps fill the roles. But for us, we are having such a hard time filling the Toastmaster role that we haven't put that on them. But if you're finding that to be truly successful, then maybe it is something that we should try.
Well, you want to create a culture of responsibility, and people need to know what is responsible. And in a Toastmasters meeting, there's 2 primary roles that I think have the highest levels of responsibility that need to be filled long before a meeting. And that is the role of the Toastmaster and the roles of speakers. Others, it's fairly easy to fill the other roles. They can be done more last minute, but the others require a lot of preparation. And this is where the VPE, Evelyn, could be, I would say, coaching people on how to be a Toastmaster. You could actually learn to be a Toastmaster and only be in Toastmasters for 2 or 3 months. You could take on the Toastmaster role because you've seen it enough, and you can have people walk them through it. Well, here's what's required, and you can teach them how to do it. Because do they have to do it perfectly?
No.
No. As a matter of fact, you don't want them doing it perfectly. You want them learning a lot of lessons. Well, what did you learn from it? So when you're Toastmaster the next time, you learn even more. But anyone can step in and be Toastmaster, and it can be a very fun role, because essentially the role of Toastmaster is to be the MC of the meeting, but you do want them to help organize the meeting. For me, the most important thing before a meeting is I want to know who's going to be there. Most people have a sense that they're going to be at a meeting, or they absolutely cannot be at a meeting. Well, if you absolutely cannot, that's helpful to know, because I'm not going to put you in on a role. But if I know you're going to be at the meeting, I'm going to want you to take on a role, and it might be as a speaker or an evaluator, and I might just assign you that role. Again, delegate it to somebody. Don't wait for people to step up. I will tell you guys, I rarely see people step up and volunteer for a role unless it's in a meeting where you're going through at the end of a meeting and saying, okay, who's going to take this role? Who's going to take that? After that, you're probably not going to get someone to sign up. They'll usually say, I'll take whatever you give me. So they want it to be delegated to them. They don't want to make the decision. So in this case here, make the decision for them, or get your VPE to do that. That's what I would say. So, but good question, everyone. So let's move on just a bit, because I have a few more things I want to teach you that are important here. One is, it's important when you're assembling the pieces of delegation of the question words. Who, what, when, where, why, how. All those words. So you want to have answers to those. So the who is, who are you going to select for the job? It's not always the person with the most experience or the person you trust the most. It might be the person who needs to learn this the most. The person who's been avoiding this job, things like that. If somebody hasn't been a Toastmaster in 6 months, then they need to be a Toastmaster in the next month or so. You shouldn't go that long without being a Toastmaster. So these are some things. So carefully select the person, then determine what you're going to delegate, because you're going to have to explain this to them. Here's what I'm delegating to you. And you want to give clear instructions. Now the challenge here is that in communication, all communication is assumption. You assume you were clear because you spoke English to them, they understand English. But does that mean you were clear? Does it mean they really understood what you meant? But do they think they understood? That's the problem. They think they understood. You think you were clear. We don't challenge that. The problem is that's not communication. The only way you know if they understood is they would have to repeat back, bless you, Leigh, you would have to have them repeat back what it was they understood. Just like if you want to make sure that people know that you understood when they're talking to you, let's say, for instance, Louise is explaining something to me, the only way she could know that I understood clearly is I would have to repeat it back in my own words. I would have to paraphrase it back, and she would have to agree, yes, that's what I'm saying. Otherwise, it's all assumption. She's just assuming I got it. So she doesn't want me to think, oh yeah, I understand. No, please tell me what you understood, because that's the only way I know what you understood. And when you're delegating, do you want to make sure they understand clearly? Because that's where it really goes wrong, is if they don't understand clearly, your delegation is going to fail. Now, one thing is you want to get used to repeating back what you heard from somebody so that they know you got it. But what if you need them to repeat it back? Let's say, for instance, I ask Evelyn, I delegate to Evelyn and I say, so Evelyn, here's what I need. And I explain to Evelyn what I need clearly. And then at the end, how do I know I was clear? I would have to have Evelyn repeat it back, right?
Yeah.
So then at the end I say, Evelyn, would you just repeat back what I just told you so that I know that we were both clear? What might Evelyn be thinking at this moment? And keep it clean, Evelyn. What might she be thinking if I ask her to repeat back what I just told her?
Basically to tell you what you just told me. So
well, because you know you have to repeat it back, but
yeah.
What would most people do if you ask them to repeat back what you just explained to them?
I know what you said.
I already got it. I understood. I speak English, okay? I understand. Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm dumb? And they get real defensive, right? And all you're asking them to do is to confirm that they understood, because it's the only way you can be clear, and yet they want to fight you. So when should I make it clear? Well, when would be the best time to make it clear that I'm going to ask you to repeat back what we're going to discuss?
Before you,
There you go.
or you communicate.
Before you ever get into it, at the very beginning, say to someone, now, Evelyn, I want to go through what we're going to be doing here, but could you do me a favor? And at the end, would you mind just repeating back how you understood it so that I can know we're both on the same page? Would that be okay?
Yes.
And she wouldn't have a problem with that. And then when I ask her to repeat it back, would she have a problem?
No.
She understands the intent. It's only when people don't get your intent. Why are you asking me this? Of course I understood. So you want to make sure they know, I'm going to ask you to repeat this back because it's the only way we know that we're both on the same page. And most people don't know that unless they've been to a seminar. So Evelyn was okay with it because she's in a seminar. She knows, like, yeah, I got to do that. But most people don't know they have to repeat it back in their own words. That's the only way to confirm clarity. Now, another thing here is it's helpful for people to know the why. Why should I have to do this? What's in it for me? It cements that commitment. You also want to make sure that you establish milestones of when you're going to check in. And how many of you would agree that it's important not to micromanage people?
Yes.
Because they don't like being micromanaged, right?
No.
And yet that's one of our fears is, who gets to decide if you're micromanaging them? You get to decide, or do they get to decide?
They get to decide.
They get to decide. So one way to ensure that you're never micromanaging someone is have them come up with the milestones and the check-in points. Make it their plan. Just keep in mind that their plan still has to work for you as well. It's got to be a win-win. So you might say, well, I do need to check in. So when would be the right amount of time, do you think, for me to check in with you to see how things are going? And have them come up with a solution. That way, they never can have a problem with you micromanaging them if you follow the plan they came up with. So, but of course, their plan has to work for you as well. So you might have to negotiate it and say, well, because you might have someone who says, oh, you don't need to check in with me. I'll get it done. Oh, that's actually not going to work for me. I do need to check in, and we just need to find something. Well, what would work well? Give me something that would work, and then come up with an agreement. That way you don't hover over them, but you can monitor. Because we do want the answer to the where we're going to support them. As John Maxwell, one of the leadership gurus, once said about delegation, if you want to do a few small things right, do them yourself. If you want to do great things and make a big impact, learn to delegate. That's why it's so important for leaders to delegate. So to know that it's a good plan, you've got to have some way to measure it. Now, has everyone heard of the SMART plan? I know it's been around for about 30 years now. And it's a way of measuring, is this a good goal? So if someone comes up with a goal, you want to be able to determine, is this going to be a good goal? Is this worthwhile? So it should be specific. So you have to make sure it's very specific. If I want to tell you guys, I just want to get healthier before the end of the year. Is that specific? What is healthier? That could be anything. So that's not, so tell me what you mean by it. Be very specific. It's got to be measurable in some ways. So how are we measuring it? Are you going to do something by a certain amount of time? Are you going to do a certain amount in a certain amount of time? Are you going to bring in 4 new members by December and then bring in 4 more new members by May of next year? So that's a specific and measurable goal. Is it actionable? You got to have some way to create an action. All goals have to have action steps. What are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? They need to be realistic. You don't want to set the goal way too high. You also don't want it to set way too low. So you got to know what's the right amount that can be a realistic goal. And you've got to have some sort of timetable you're working at. When are you going to start? When should you be 25% done? When should I expect to see 50% of this done? Because keep in mind, if you give people 2 weeks to get something done that should only take them 4 days, how long will it take them?
2 weeks.
Actually, Louise, 2 weeks is when they're going to come back and ask for more time because they never started it, because you gave them too much time. So you got to have a clear time frame, and 75% of people do that. They will put off things if you give them too much time. Now, 25% will stay on task, but you've got to make sure that you time things well and that you check in with them. Now, I like adding a few more things to make it smarter, and the ER is it should also be evaluated. You want to make sure after you have this, you achieve these goals, evaluate how did it go, what lessons were learned, and review these things. So evaluate and review. The feedback is always important in Toastmasters, and you want to learn the lessons from anything you do, whether you succeeded or failed. Always have a way to evaluate and review how it went. And of course, you want to keep those evaluations very positive and constructive. It's not about beating them up for what they didn't do. It's about looking about what got in the way and what could they do differently next time. So you always keep it positive. That is the smarter goals. Any questions about that? And the last is my favorite thing to teach, which is the 8 steps. And one person that I love and respect so much, Sandra Day O'Connor, one of our Supreme Court justices, said that the really expert riders of horses let the horse know immediately who is in control. You'll like that, Evelyn. Let them know immediately who is in control, but then guide the horse with loose reins and seldom use the spurs. That comes from a good horsewoman who knows how to work with horses. Not that you guys are working with horses, but people aren't all that different. So this works for people too. They don't like people being too mean. And in Toastmasters, you don't have that kind of authority over them to make them do anything. You don't want to, you don't want to anger them. So if you're going to delegate, you should have a checklist. So I made the word delegate into a checklist. So the D, you need to decide the what, the when, the where, the why, the how, the who. So all the question words. Before you ever delegate, think about the answers to all those questions. Who am I going to delegate? What am I going to delegate? Why am I going to delegate? Where, when, how? And of course, you want to leave most of the how they're going to do it up to them. But how you're going to delegate, you want to think about how am I going to approach them? What are we going to say? The second thing is you want to explain to them clearly what the expectations and the results that are to be expected. And how do you know you were clear, Louise?
You talk to them.
You talk to them,
questions.
Ask questions, and they need to tell you back or give you feedback how they understood it. Yeah, that's it. So you explain to them, and then they explain back how they understood it. And Ava, when do you want to let them know you're going to ask them to explain it back?
At the very beginning.
At the very beginning. All right. The third thing is you've got to leverage your resources, because your job when you delegate to other people is to help them be successful. So find out what do they need to be successful and get them what they need. If they need more time, if they need certain resources, certain incentives, whatever it is, if you're delegating to someone to build the membership, they're going to need time. They're going to need some sort of tools. They're going to need some way to leverage. What can we offer people that would make them want to become members? The number one way I got 7 people to join my club in one day is I told them, I'm a professional trainer. Not all clubs have a professional trainer in the club who can actually coach you professionally. And I will offer you 1 hour of free coaching on your speeches if you join my club. So I did that, yeah. But anybody, if you're an experienced Toastmaster, you can do the same thing. You've got experience that you can offer people, and you could coach them yourself. And that's something they're not going to get just anywhere. So that was one way of leveraging some resources that were going to help to ensure that they would be successful. I said, you can use me as a resource if you need to find people who will join our club. So, but there are many resources out there. Number 4, the other E is empower them. Let them come up with their own plan. Because when it's their plan, they're accountable. If it's your plan, do they feel like they need to put 100% into your plan?
No.
Because what can they say if they tried your plan and it didn't work?
Your fault.
This is your
Don't
fault.
blame me. You told me to do it that way. And Leigh, does that ever happen with your kids when you tell them to do something and then they do it, but they don't put that much energy in? It's like, no, that's not what well, that's what you told me. So maybe not your kids. Your kids are good. But for most kids, but for most kids, they're looking for an excuse for how they can get away with it. Well, you can't get away with it when it was your plan. If you fail with your plan, you're the one responsible, 100%. Another thing that's important is get an agreement, get commitment from them. Make sure that they've agreed to do it. So have you agreed to the plan? Get that commitment, because you're going to hold them accountable. And the way you hold them accountable is you follow up. And how do you make sure you're not following up too intensely where it comes across as micromanaging?
Have them set the time.
Have them tell you what the plan's going to be for the follow-up. It just needs to work for Louise as well. So if I tell Louise, well, you can just check in with me at the end of the month, and she said, no, I'm going to need to know a little bit more. You let me know a little bit earlier. How about you let me know about the end of each week where you are? You know, when I was working with my coaches, my club coaches, I didn't need to know every week where they were, but at least once a month, I wanted to know, are we making any progress? What's your plans? Does the club have a plan? Are they acting on their plan? You know, I just want to know what's happening here. So, and number 7 is sometimes our job is to train them. So find out what their needs are and train them as needed. And then lastly, and this is perhaps the most important, express gratitude. When people take on a task, especially if they get it done, find ways to reward people. And the most powerful reward is just praising people. Praise them on what a great job it was. Be very specific. Just like with the SMART goals, your praise should also be specific, measurable. You know, it's got to be something that they really sense is authentic. And the best way to praise people, if you really want it to hit home in a very powerful way, I teach people something called hit and run praise. When you hit people with praise when they least expect it. So you catch them off guard and you praise them specifically about something they did very recently and let them know how much you appreciate the efforts they've made or the work they put into it, and how, you know, I really appreciate it. You tell them how much it helps the club or whatever, and encourage them to do more of it, and then just walk away. So this is hit and run. A good way to do it is to call people and let them know, hey, I know you're really busy and I just wanted to take a moment of your time because I've got a meeting coming up myself. But hey, I just want to let you know, I was so impressed about how you worked with this person and got them to join the club. I mean, I've been working with them for months and it was amazing how you used just the right touch. You knew just what to say. I really could use more people like you helping us bring in new members. And I would hope in the future you help us again as we do some more of our membership drives. So thank you. It was a wonderful job. Well, I'll let you get off to your day. Thanks again. Take care. And then you get off the phone and you leave them in a state of shock, but they will remember that for weeks. It has such an impact. They go, wow, that was nice. So that hit and run praise is a powerful way to express your gratitude in a way that gets people to be even more committed. So the takeaways for today was that we defined dynamic delegation. We focused on what the benefits are, as well as some of the drawbacks that can keep people away from delegating, and showing that the benefits far outweigh the costs. We also talked about putting together the pieces of the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and why you want to have that plan at the very beginning. How to set smarter goals so that you got goals that will be effective. And lastly, apply that checklist so that when you delegate, the DELEGATE, you get results that you're going for. So I hope you guys have had some fun today, and I hope you've learned a few things. I can send this out to you, this program. And does anyone have any questions at this point about delegation?
I just want to say that I'm very thankful that you make me think about the difference between micromanaging and managing. Because I used to think I'm not micromanaging, but use your standard, you know, ask them to come up with a plan, ask them to come up with that line, ask them to, so using that standard, I am micromanaging. So I feel like I have nothing to say. I need to relook my thing.
Yeah, you don't mean to micromanage, but then who gets to decide if you're micromanaging? They do. So that's where, your intent is not to micromanage, but I mean, Evelyn is so passionate and you're very passionate about what you're going for, but that passion can come across as pressuring.
Right.
And you don't want to come across like you're pressuring them. And this is one way to do it so that you're not coming across as micromanaging or pressuring, but still getting it done. So good point. Thank you for that, Lay. I appreciate that feedback. Anybody else?
For me, I would love like a part 2 for delegation when it's not in a position of authority.
Okay.
And it's more, I guess, motivation than delegation, but it's also getting people to do what you want them to do, what you need them to do when you don't have that authority as much. So when you're not in a position of leadership, because even in Toastmasters, if you have an officer role, you have a position of authority, and it's easier to get things. Now it's harder because you're working with a bunch of volunteers. But what about when you're in a team setting and you don't have that position? You're just a member, or you're just an employee.
Well, Ava, this is where I say it's so important to delegate in your clubs, even to new members. They should all be playing roles outside of just being a member. Because who's responsible for running a Toastmasters meeting? Or not a meeting, but a club. Who's responsible for running that club and making sure it's successful?
Everybody.
Everybody should play a role. So give people at least small roles, little bits of delegation, so that whether they're going to be a mentor or whether they're going to be on one of the committees. I love having committees like a VP PR committee where you've got somebody who just volunteers to give an hour of their time a month helping with the PR with the club. You're not asking for a lot of their time, but just a little bit, and get people used to making commitments. So if you can get people to be passionate as you guys are, about why it matters, why does this club matter, and do you want to help us succeed? And if they want to help us succeed, if they want this club to succeed, we're all responsible. So Evelyn, if your club Maximus is going to succeed, everybody has to feel some sort of responsibility for building this club, bringing people to meetings, talking up Toastmasters to other people. It doesn't just need to be the VP of PR or the membership VP or you. It should be everyone in the club. And so why not ask each person in your club to identify one person they can have a conversation with each month and see if they can get that one person to come to a meeting. It's amazing how you can build up, even in a closed club, how you can do this when you delegate to other people to take on the responsibilities, which is theirs, to help build this club just as much as it's the officers. And it also gets them used to thinking, oh, well, I guess I should take on more responsibility and maybe even become an officer next year. So get them into that early on, Ava. That would be one. When they're new to the club, say, what committee would you like to be on? Don't even give them a choice. Let them know there are committees, and we'd like you to be on one of the committees. That doesn't mean they have to put a lot of work in, but they commit to being on the committee, and that's the first step.
We should have committees. That sounds like the first step.
I think that's a great way to do it, where people start feeling more responsible than just the officers.
We just have assistants. We don't have committees. That's great.
Well, and keep in mind, why is Toastmasters so inexpensive? Why don't we just pay people? Well, how much would you have to charge to be able to pay the officers? A lot more than $60 every 6 months, right? So, but the whole point is, if you're just paying $10 a month for a learning program, you should be able to be giving back a little something, because if you were to join a university program or take Dale Carnegie at several $1,000s for a program, yes, you'll have people who will coach you and such, but they get paid to do that. We're not getting paid to do this. Everybody should step up, and that's why delegating is so important. So I hope you all have had a great time. It's been a pleasure working with y'all, and I'll have this recording available for people. And again, thank you for making time.